You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. Chapter 62. Song Jiang's men attack Daming Prefecture. Guanxing discusses the capture of Liangshan Marsh. It was not long before the police found Lu Junyi and Shirxiu, and took them bound to the yamen. Having been brought before Grand Secretary Liang, Shirxiu glared at him and abused him. You are a crook that does the work of the slave's slave. But very soon my elder brother will arrive here with troops, attack and destroy the whole town. You will then be cut into 3 parts. He asked me to come here and inform you of your fate. Many of the yamen officials were afraid, as Shirxiu said this several times. When Grand Secretary Liang heard of this, he could not speak for some time. He then ordered that large cangs be placed on the prisoners, and that they be sent into the prison for those about to be executed. He also instructed Kai Fu to guard them well, as they must not escape again. Now Kai Fu wished to be on good terms with Liangshan Marsh, so he placed the prisoners in quite decent cells, and gave them excellent food, so that they had nothing to complain of. Grand Secretary Liang also instructed his assistant to suitably compensate the relatives of the persons who had been killed by Shirxiu. There were at least 70 men who had been killed. A great many had been injured. They were given medical attendance and medicine free. The next day the people found that anonymous placards had been secretly posted all over the town, so they at once took some to the Grand Secretary, who found them read as follows. I, Song Jiang, Commander-in-Chief, at Liangshan Marsh hereby proclaim to all the officials at Daming Prefecture that Lu Junyi is the most honorable man in the land. I invited him to come to see me, and act with me in accordance with the will of heaven. How dare you, corrupt officials, accept secret bribes and oppress the people? I sent Shirxiu to report this to you, but you have also arrested him. You must not execute those 2 prisoners, but at once arrest the adulterer, and the adulteress who have caused this trouble. Should you execute my brothers, I shall come with large armies and take full revenge on you. I shall make no discrimination, but kill everybody. I will root out the lawbreakers, and heaven and earth will approve of my administration of justice. I chat and smile at this small affair, but I will come dancing to the beating of drums. Just men and decent women, filial sons and obedient grandsons, orderly citizens, and honest officials need have no fear of us. I issue this for your information. As the Grand Secretary read this, his color changed, and he was quite nonplussed to know what to do. He, however, sent for his assistant Wang to discuss the matter with him. Wang was a weak person, and when he had heard the details he said, the imperial troops have tried several times to exterminate those brigands at Liangshan Marsh, but have failed every time, so what can we do as we are so weak? If the brigands attack us there will be no time to get more troops, and we shall soon be defeated. So I think it would be wiser for us not to execute the prisoners. Then we must report the matter at once to Prime Minister Kai, and secondly we must assemble our troops outside the town so as to be prepared against the attack. If we do this I do not think there will be much danger, and the people will not suffer from an attack outside the town. Grand Secretary Liang agreed to this, and sent for the head jailer, Kai Fu. When he arrived the Grand Secretary said to him, those 2 prisoners are evidently very important persons, and I am afraid that if roughly treated by you they might die. You must therefore treat them well. When Kai Fu heard this he was much pleased as it agreed with what he had already done. He returned to the jail and told his brother about the new order. Grand Secretary Liang next sent for his 2 generals to discuss matters with them. When they heard the news General Li Qing said, I think this place is too far from Liangshan Marsh, and the brigands will never get here. So why should you worry about this impudent notice? I have not much ability, but still I hold this important post. I have received imperial favors, but so far have not been able to show my gratitude in a practical way. I am willing to do my utmost for my master, and will take the troops and encamp outside the town. If the brigands come I will never let them go back alive. The Grand Secretary was much pleased at this, and presented the general with much silk and gold. The following day General Li Qing held a conference of all his officers, and there one of his officers, Suo Chao, the urgent vanguard, stepped forward. Li Qing addressed him, Song Jiang and his brigands will soon be here to attack Daming Prefecture. I want you to take command of some troops and establish a camp about 12 li from the town. I will come and join you there with more men. Suat Chao, having received his orders, took his troops the following day to a place called Feihu Gully, and there established a camp. General Li Qing established another camp about 3 li nearer the town at a village called Huaishu Mound. Around these camps hidden pits and traps were made, so that the positions seemed impregnable. The officers and men felt quite secure, and calmly awaited the arrival of the brigands. The proclamation issued from Liangshan Marsh was composed by Wu Yong, and was posted on every bridge and on every road. Daizong kept the leaders at Liangshan Marsh well informed as to the developments at Daming Prefecture. At a conference of leaders, Song Jiang spoke to Wu Yong. You had a good plan to inveigle Lu Junyi to our hold, but now he is in trouble. Our strong brother Shirshio has also been arrested. Have you any suggestion as to how we can save their lives? Brother, do not worry, said Wu Yong. If we embrace the present opportunities, we can not only save those 2 lives, but also seize much loot at Daming. Tomorrow is a very auspicious day, and I want you to give me half of our forces to proceed to Daming. This was agreed to, and men were appointed for the coming expedition. But Li Kuei interposed, it is a long time since my 2 axes joined in a fray, and as they have just heard of this expedition, they are naturally very glad. So please let me lead 500 men in this expedition. I'll take Daming, chop Grand Secretary Liang to mincemeat, hack apart Li Gu and his old bag, rescue Li Junyi and Shirshio. Previously I was told to remain dumb on an expedition, but now I want to vent my anger. Younger brother, said Song Jiang, this is a very serious and important affair, and we must not forget that Grand Secretary Liang is the son-in-law of Prime Minister Kai. The government troops will be in charge of 2 great generals, Li Cheng and Wen Da, who are brave and the equal of 10,000 men. We cannot treat them lightly, although I do not doubt your bravery and fierceness. Elder brother, you know that I am outspoken, so you expected me to be silent, said Li Kuei. Now I should be only too pleased to kill our enemies, so why not let me go? In that case, said Wu Yong, you had better go in advance. You can lead a vanguard of 500 men, and conduct your own fighting. You can start tomorrow. That evening Song Jiang talked over the details of the expedition with Wu Yong, and Pei Xian wrote out the various orders, and dispatched them to the various leaders. It was just the end of autumn, and the country was very suitable for campaigning. The horses were well fed and were in good condition. The men had rested for some time, and were quite ready for some more fighting. They got their arms, saddled the horses, and left the mountain in 4 divisions the next day. Suat Chao at his camp near the Feihu Gully received a report from his scout that the brigands were now only 10 li away, and were quickly advancing. He sent the news to General Li Qing, who sent all his cavalry to support Suat Chao. They were duly placed in position by Suat Chao. The following day breakfast was taken at daybreak, and then they all went to meet the brigands. The brigands were approaching, and as they got near it was seen that Li Kuei was in front of them. When near, he shouted, "Do you recognize your lord, Black Whirlwind, the hero of Liangshan Marsh?" General Li Qing on his horse laughed at this, and spoke to Suat Chao, "I have heard of the men of Liangshan Marsh, but this is a very dirty lot, and we need not take any notice of them. Now General, let us take that fellow." Suat Chao also laughed, and replied, "It is beneath me. There is somebody else." Near them was a lieutenant named Wang Ding who heard this, and without waiting for an order he galloped forward to fight with Li Kuei, and was followed by his 100 cavalrymen. When Li Kuei's foot soldiers saw the cavalry they turned and fled in all directions. As the cavalry pursued the men, Suat Chao saw a large body of brigands advancing on both flanks, so he signaled an order for the cavalry to retire. General Li Qing however asked, "Why not let them capture those brigands?" "I am afraid there may be an ambush, and our cavalry might fall into a trap," replied Suat Chao. But General Li Qing did not agree with this, and ordered the soldiers to advance. As General Li Qing advanced he saw that the main body of the brigands was led by a girl on horseback. On the flag he read the name of the commander, Woman General, the 10 feet of green. The men were of all sizes, some big and some small, so that they looked disorderly. Li Qing turned to Suo Chao. What is the use of this ill-assorted rabble? You take some men to fight that lot, while I will capture some of the other brigands. Suo Chao whipped his horse and dashed forward. When the girl Hussein Niang, the 10 feet of green, saw him coming, she turned her horse round and galloped off, followed by her men and her lady lieutenants, Gu Deseo and Sun Er Nyang. General Li Qing ordered his men to spread out and attack the retreating brigands. He had not gone far when he saw large bodies of brigands approaching, shouting and waving their arms. He therefore ordered a retreat, but when this movement was being done, he found brigands on both his flanks. Hussein Niang and her followers returned, and were now attacking his army in the rear. His men could not stand the attack on 3 sides, and they soon broke into disorder, and galloped off in all directions. As he neared his camp he found his way blocked by Li Kuei and his men. General Li Qing signaled for a charge, and his men bore down on Li Kuei's body of men, and dividing it cut their way through. Upon reaching their camp he realized that he had lost a good number of his men. The brigands, however, did not advance any further, and so the battle came to a halt. When Grand Secretary Liang heard of the defeat, he immediately ordered General Wenda to take the reserve of soldiers to support General Li Qing. Upon reaching the camp, Li Qing met Wenda, and after discussing the position asked for the latter's opinion. General Wenda laughed and replied, "It is only like a painful sore, and is of no importance." They however discussed their plans for the following day, and came to an agreement. Early the next morning rations were served to the troops, and after breakfast orders were issued for a general advance, and they had just got moving when the brigands appeared in the distance, also marching towards them. General Wenda gave orders for the troops to halt and open out, and for bows and arrows and spears to be ready. The brigands also halted, but a horseman rode forth with a red flag bearing the characters Qin Ming the Thunderer. He pulled up his horse just in front of the imperial troops and shouted out, "Let covetous and corrupt officers from Daming Prefecture listen to me. For a long time I have planned to attack your town, but deferred doing so because I did not wish to injure the common people there. But if you will now release Lu Junyi and Shi Xiao, and hand over the adulterer and adulteress, we will at once retire, without any further fighting. If, however, you are stubborn, and will not listen to this proposal, then tell me so at once." General Wenda was angry at this, and turning round to his men asked, "Who will volunteer to go out and attack that fellow?" Before he had finished saying this, Suo Chao galloped forward to fight. Halting, he called out to Qin Ming, "You were previously in the imperial army, and you were not ill-treated. So why are you now a brigand instead of being a loyal man? Today I will capture you, and cut you up into small pieces." At this Qin Ming was wild with rage, and raising his spiked mace, dashed forward. Suo Chao did likewise. Their horses took their riders' temper, and were also keen for the fray. The assembled troops cheered at the sight. The two fought for about 20 bouts without either gaining any advantage. Among the brigands was the leader Han Tao, who shot an arrow, which struck Suo Chao in the shoulder, and as the latter could no longer wield his battle axe, he turned his horse and retreated. Song Jiang, seeing this, signaled the order for a general advance, and then began a great battle. Blood was flowing over the ground like water. The imperial troops gave way, and being again defeated, retreated to their camp. They further retreated to the second camp at the Feihu Gully. There Wenda found that he had lost about 1/3 of his men. Song Jiang halted his men at the first camp, and discussed matters with Wu Yong, who said, "The troops have been defeated a second time, so that their morale will be weak just now. We must seize this opportunity for a further attack, before they have had time to recover." Song Jiang agreed to this, and issued orders at once for a general attack that very night. General Wenda was resting, and meditating in his tent that night, when a soldier reported to him that there was a big fire on the east. General Wenda immediately mounted his horse, and riding forward he saw all the hills and plains to the east were lit up. Looking round, he now saw that to the west of his camp it was also ablaze with lights. He returned to camp and saw that the brigands were advancing on both sides. He was very much upset and had no definite plan of defense. The brigands approached with great noise. The imperial troops were restless and were evidently on the point of decamping, but they were now quite surrounded. General Wenda had decided to cut a way through with his men, but just then the brigands opened fire upon them. He could not control his men any longer, as they were in great disorder. He therefore spoke to General Li Qing to get a few men together, and then with a sudden rush they broke through the cordon of brigands, and so escaped. This remnant of the imperial troops reached Daming just after daybreak. When Grand Secretary Liang heard of the disaster, he felt as though he had lost 2 of his 3 souls. He hurriedly ordered all the remainder of his troops to rescue. When the defeated troops had all entered the town, he ordered that all the gates be closed, and the wall strongly defended. The following day the brigands approached and encamped outside the east gate. The Grand Secretary summoned a conference of all officials to discuss means of defending the town. At the meeting General Li Qing spoke, "The brigands are just outside the town, and we are in great danger. If we are not careful, the town will soon be taken. Sir, you should write a personal note to Prime Minister Kai, explaining our position and asking for immediate relief. Send this by a very trusty and confidential courier this very night. Secondly, you should dispatch urgent letters to all the surrounding towns asking for support. Thirdly, you should issue a proclamation in this town appealing to every man to join in the defense of the town. They must prepare logs of wood and stone to hurl at the enemy, arm themselves with crossbows and stiff bows, get bottles of powder and lime dust, vile-smelling manure, and take guard both night and day. If we do this at once, we may be able to hold out for some time." "I can write all the dispatches you refer to," said the Grand Secretary, "but who can face the danger outside and get through?" Lieutenant Wang Ding volunteered to do this, and that night he left with the confidential dispatches. He was successful, and reaching the nearest town he delivered the messages, and had them sent to all the surrounding towns. He himself went on to the eastern capital with the important dispatch. On the other hand, Song Jiang divided his men and besieged the town on 3 sides, but he left the south gate open intentionally. He also ordered for supplies to be sent from Liangshan Marsh, as he was uncertain how long the attack would last. He was however determined to continue his attack until both Lu Junyi and Shi Xiu were rescued. Every day General Li Qing and Wenda led some of his soldiers outside the town to skirmish with the brigands, but could not succeed. Wang Ding quickly reached the eastern capital and delivered the confidential dispatches to Prime Minister Kai. The latter was astonished at the news and questioned Wang Ding closely. Wang Ding told the whole story of Lu Junyi and explained in detail how the imperial troops had been defeated by the brigands. The Prime Minister then told him to go and take rest after his tiresome journey, while he would discuss the matter with the other ministers. Prime Minister Kai Jing then summoned all the ministers to assemble in the Grand Council to discuss urgent matters. It was not long before all were assembled, and then Prime Minister Kai Jing explained what had happened at the northern capital. He asked what can be done to relieve the town and defeat the brigands. The ministers looked at each other in a helpless air, but nobody spoke. A man, however, stepped forward from behind the seat occupied by the commander of the infantry. He was Xian Zan, a captain of the Imperial Guard. His face was dark and had a snub nose. His hair was curly, and his mustache was red. He was very tall, and was armed with a steel sword. During a war against a Mongol tribe he had distinguished himself as a skillful bowman, and the prince was so pleased with his skill that he had been given the prince's daughter in marriage. But the girl had not loved him, and as she had died after a short term of married life, he had fallen into disfavor with the prince, who had given him a minor military position as captain in a cavalry regiment. For this reason he gained the nickname of disgraceful son-in-law. He now addressed Prime Minister Kai Jing. "When I lived at home I knew a man named Guan Sheng, who is a descendant of the famous general of the Three Kingdoms, Guan Gong. His manner and form carries a close resemblance to his ancestor, and he always carries a great halberd like Guan Gong. Because of this he is called Guan Sheng, the Great Halberd. He is in charge of a police force at Pudong in Shaanxi province, and is well known for his military skill. Nobody can beat him, and he is quite fearless. If presents were made to him, and he was promoted to some responsible position in the army, I think he could exterminate the brigands, and make the country safe. Kai Jing was much pleased at this suggestion, and at once commissioned Xianzan, the disgraceful son-in-law, to send a dispatch to Guansheng and bring him to the eastern capital, Kaifeng, without delay. We need not go into many details, but will just say that Xianzan duly carried out his orders, and quickly reached Pudong. He was gladly welcomed by Guansheng, who had not seen him for a long time. When Xianzan had delivered his message, Guansheng was highly delighted at the news. He then introduced him to his best friend, Hao Siwen, and told him the story of Hao's birth. Hao Siwen's mother dreamt that a star, Jing Muan, descended and entered her womb. Soon afterwards a son was born, and he was called Hao Siwen, with the nickname Jing Muan. He is well skilled in military drill, but so far has no opportunity of proving his ability, and lives an insignificant life here. Guansheng proposed to take Hao Siwen with him to fight against the brigands. This was agreed to, and they set out that night for the eastern capital. Their arrival was reported to Prime Minister Kai Jing, who invited them to enter. They all three entered the hall and saluted. Kai Jing was pleased with Guansheng's appearance, and asked for his age. Guansheng replied that he was 32 years old. Kai Jing then explained the position at the northern capital, Daming Prefecture, and asked if he had any suggestions to make. I have long heard, said Guansheng, that those brigands occupy Liangshan Marsh, and make disturbances in the surrounding country. For the first time, however, they now leave their base far behind, so I think we can easily defeat them. However, it would be useless to rescue Daming Prefecture with a large force. I beg you to give me 10,000 soldiers to capture Liangshan Marsh first, and by cutting off their base we can early arrest the brigands. Kai Jing was very much pleased at this, and said, that is the same method that was used in rescuing the kingdom of Zhao by besieging the capital of the kingdom of Wei. I agree with your plans. He then summoned the grand counselors, and explaining the plan got 3 armies placed under the command of Guansheng. An immediate start took place, and the armies went straight to Liangshan Marsh. When dragons leave their home ITHC, they cannot fly ITH clouds. When tigers come down to the plain, of what use are their claws? While yearning for the autumn moon, the pearls in the tray are stolen.